January 15, 2024, Thule Air Base, Greenland. Dr. James Landon stared at the satellite imagery on his tablet, his coffee growing cold beside him. After 20 years of searching, there it was, the unmistakable silhouette of an aircraft, its metallic frame ghostly white against the endless Arctic ice. American Airlines Flight 219 had finally been found. He zoomed in on the image, his hands trembling slightly. The Boeing 747 lay partially buried in the ice, its tail fins still proudly displaying the familiar red and blue stripes of American Airlines. The preservation was remarkable, a testament to the Arctic's unforgiving temperatures that had entombed the aircraft for over 4 decades. "Sarah!" he called out to his research partner, Dr. Sarah Chin. "You need to see this." Sarah hurried over, her boots echoing on the metal floor of their makeshift command center. At 42, she was nearly 2 decades younger than James, but her expertise in Arctic archaeology had proven invaluable to their search. "Is that?" she whispered, leaning over his shoulder. "A219. After all these years." James ran a hand through his silver hair. 216 passengers and crew. Gone without a trace on December 12, 1983. The disappearance of Flight A219 had haunted the aviation industry for decades. The aircraft had been en route from London Heathrow to New York JFK when it vanished over the Arctic Circle. Despite an extensive search operation that lasted months, no trace of the aircraft or its passengers had ever been found. Until now. February 2024, Arctic Research Station Delta. The expedition team assembled by Dr. Landon was a carefully selected group of experts. Besides Sarah, there was Tom Rodriguez, their chief engineer, whose experience with Arctic salvage operations was unparalleled. Emma Watson, a British aviation accident investigator, had joined them from the Air Accidents Investigation Branch in Farnborough. Dr. Michael Brooks, their medical examiner and forensic specialist, had worked on some of the most challenging recovery operations in aviation history. They gathered in the briefing room of Research Station Delta, a collection of heated containers that would serve as their base of operations. Outside, the wind howled across the endless white landscape, a constant reminder of the hostile environment they faced. "The aircraft lies approximately 12 miles northwest of our position," James explained, pointing to a digital map. "Initial scans suggest it's buried under roughly 30 feet of ice and snow. The preservation appears to be exceptional, possibly due to a combination of the extreme cold and the way it was sealed in the ice shortly after the crash." Emma studied the preliminary data. "The aircraft's position suggests it made a controlled landing, or at least as controlled as possible under the circumstances. The fuselage appears largely intact, which means we might find answers," Sarah added softly. "And maybe bring some peace to the families who've waited 40 years to know what happened to their loved ones." Tom cleared his throat. "The excavation won't be easy. We're looking at temperatures dropping to -50 degrees Celsius, and we'll have limited daylight. Not to mention the polar bears. We've got the best security measures in place," James assured him. "And we've coordinated with the Greenland authorities for emergency support if needed." As they discussed the technical details of the operation, none of them could have predicted the extraordinary events that would unfold over the next few weeks. February 15, 2024. The first week of excavation was grueling. Despite their state-of-the-art equipment, the Arctic ice proved to be a formidable adversary. They worked in shifts, using specialized heating equipment and careful drilling techniques to slowly expose the aircraft without damaging it. Emma spent hours documenting every detail of the excavation, her British thoroughness proving invaluable. "The ice has preserved everything remarkably well," she noted in her log. Even the paint on the fuselage is still visible in some areas. It was during the second week that they made their first significant discovery. As they cleared the ice around the cockpit, they found the flight deck intact, frozen in time. The instruments were still set exactly as they had been on that fateful December night in 1983. Michael suited up in protective gear to enter the cockpit first. The scene inside was eerie. Everything was exactly where it had been left, covered in a thin layer of frost. The captain's logbook lay open on the center console, its pages preserved by the cold. The last entry is timestamped 2147, Michael reported through his radio. Captain Williams noted severe weather conditions and problems with the navigation equipment. But it was what they found in the passenger cabin that truly began to tell the story of Flight A219's final hours. February 22, 2024. As they carefully cleared more of the fuselage, the passenger cabin revealed itself to be a perfectly preserved snapshot of 1983. Magazines lay open on tray tables, their pages still showing advertisements for Coca-Cola and IBM personal computers. A child's stuffed animal, a worn teddy bear, sat forlornly in seat 14C. The personal effects they discovered told stories of lives interrupted. A businessman's briefcase contained contracts dated December 12, 1983, never to be signed. A young woman's diary ended mid-entry. The turbulence is getting worse, but the flight attendant says this is normal for. Sarah found herself particularly moved by a collection of Polaroid photographs scattered near one of the seats. They showed a family's Christmas vacation in London, parents and two young children posing in front of Big Ben, riding the London Eye, feeding pigeons in Trafalgar Square. Their happy faces, frozen in time, were a stark reminder of the human cost of the tragedy. But it was the discovery in the rear of the aircraft that changed everything they thought they knew about Flight A219's final hours. February 25, 2024. In the rear galley, they found a makeshift shelter. Blankets had been arranged into sleeping areas, and oxygen masks had been modified to collect moisture from breath for drinking water. Food cart supplies had been carefully rationed, with detailed tallies scratched onto the metal walls. They survived the initial crash, Emma realized, her voice thick with emotion. At least some of them did. Further investigation revealed a diary kept by flight attendant Patricia Martinez. The entries spanned several days after the crash. December 13, 1983. We crashed yesterday. Captain Williams managed to land the plane somehow, but he didn't make it. Neither did First Officer Chen. We have 32 survivors. The radio is dead. Emergency locator isn't working. It's so cold. December 14, 1983. Lost Mrs. Henderson and her baby today. The cold is unbearable. We're using everything we can find to stay warm. Flight attendant Kevin is organizing supplies. Some passengers are talking about trying to walk out, but we know that would be suicide. December 15, 1983. The bears came today. We thought they would attack, but they just watched us through the windows. There's something almost human in their eyes. Kevin says I'm imagining things, but others have noticed it too. The diary continued for several more days, describing their desperate struggle for survival and increasingly strange observations about the polar bears that seemed to have taken an interest in the crash site. March 1, 2024. The team had been aware of the polar bears in the area since they began their excavation, but it wasn't until early March that they experienced their first close encounter. It happened while Sarah was documenting ice core samples near the aircraft's tail section. She heard the snow crunching behind her and turned to find herself face to face with a massive polar bear. Instead of attacking, the bear simply stood there, watching her with what she would later describe as An almost conscious curiosity. It was like it knew why we were there. Sarah would write in her journal that night. Like it was trying to tell us something. Over the next few days, the bears, a mother and 2 cubs, became a regular presence at the excavation site. Their behavior was unlike anything the team's wildlife experts had seen before. They maintained a respectful distance but seemed to watch the excavation with apparent interest. "It reminds me of Patricia's diary entries," Emma commented one evening. The way she described the bears watching over the survivors. The connection between the bears and the crash site became even more intriguing when they discovered a series of photographs in a camera found in the wreckage. The final shots, taken by one of the survivors, showed polar bears bringing what appeared to be seals to the crash site. March 10, 2024. As they pieced together the evidence from the wreckage, flight recorders, and survivors' accounts, the story of Flight AA-219's final hours became clear. The aircraft had encountered a severe storm system that their weather radar had failed to detect. Ice buildup on the wings and navigation equipment failure had forced them to descend. Captain Williams, showing remarkable skill, had managed to land the aircraft on the ice, saving many lives in the process. But the impact had damaged their emergency locator transmitter, leaving them with no way to signal for help. The survivors had lasted for nearly 2 weeks after the crash. Patricia's diary revealed that the polar bears had not only refrained from attacking but had seemingly tried to help, bringing them food and maintaining a protective presence around the aircraft. The final entry in the diary, dated December 24, 1983, read, "Christmas Eve. The cold is worse than ever. We're down to 12 now. The bears are still here. Yesterday, I swear the mother bear was trying to get us to follow her. Maybe she knows something we don't. But we're too weak to move now. If anyone finds this, please tell our families we tried to survive. And please try to understand about the bears. There's something here we don't understand, something more than just animals and instinct. Something." The entry ended there. The investigation's findings revolutionized understanding of both aviation safety and Arctic wildlife behavior. The technical data recovered from the aircraft led to improved weather detection systems and cold weather operation protocols that would help prevent similar tragedies. But it was the story of the polar bears that captured the world's imagination. Wildlife researchers began studying unusual instances of polar bear behavior toward humans, discovering other cases of seemingly conscious assistance. Dr. Landon's team published their findings in both scientific journals and a book that became an international bestseller. The story of Flight AA-219 and its guardian bears became a symbol of hope and the mysterious connection between humans and nature. 1 year after the discovery, Dr. James Landon stood at the memorial service in New York, where families of the Flight AA-219 victims had gathered. The service was being held simultaneously with one in London, bridging the 2 cities that the flight had tried to connect on that December night in 1983. As he looked out at the faces of children and grandchildren of the passengers and crew, he thought about the mysterious bears that had watched over their loved ones in their final days. The mother bear and her cubs still patrolled the area around the crash site, as confirmed by satellite imagery and research teams. Sarah joined him at the podium, carrying Patricia Martinez's diary, which would be placed in the Smithsonian's collection. "The families needed this," she whispered. "They needed to know their loved ones weren't alone at the end." James nodded, thinking of his own connection to the flight. He had never told anyone, not even Sarah, that his older sister had been one of the passengers. It was what had driven him to spend 20 years searching for the truth. As the names of the victims were read aloud, snow began to fall outside the church windows, soft, gentle flakes that reminded him of the Arctic wilderness. Somewhere in that vast whiteness, the bears still roamed, carrying with them a story of humanity, survival, and the inexplicable bonds that can form between species in the face of tragedy. The mystery of Flight A219 had been solved, but its legacy would continue to inspire and wonder for generations to come. In the end, it was more than just a story of loss and survival. It was a reminder that even in our darkest hours, we are never truly alone, and help can come from the most unexpected sources.